On August 28, 1811, a crowd gathered along the banks of the Mississippi River in Pittsburgh to witness something that would change America forever. The New Orleans, the first steamboat to navigate western rivers, was about to begin her journey down the Ohio and the Mississippi. Most people thought she would sink. Some thought she was cursed. What actually happened? She opened a transportation network that would eventually move more cargo than the rest of the world's rivers combined. But here's the thing. This is not a story about steamboats or history. It's about why your gas costs what it does, why American farmers can compete with Brazil despite having workers who earn 8 times more, and why a 170-year-old tunnel outside Baltimore could crash the entire East Coast economy tomorrow. I'm talking about America's 12,000 miles of navigable rivers, and most people have no idea they exist. Picture this. A single barge, just one. It carries as much cargo as 70 semi-trucks or 16 rail cars. Now imagine 15 of those barges lashed together, pushed by one tugboat with a crew of maybe 8. That's 1,050 trucks worth of cargo moving down the Mississippi right now, burning a fraction of the fuel, generating a fraction of the emissions, and causing 0 traffic jams. The math is kind of insane. Moving 1 ton of cargo by truck, you get about 155 miles per gallon of fuel. By train, 413 miles per gallon. By barge on the Mississippi, 576 miles per gallon. It's not even close. This is why a farmer in Iowa can grow soybeans, ship them down the Mississippi to New Orleans, load them onto a container ship bound for Shanghai, and still undercut Brazilian farmers who grow the exact same crop. Brazilian soybeans mostly travel by truck. American soybeans float. Let me show you what this actually looks like. Right now, somewhere near St. Louis, there is probably a towboat pushing 15 barges loaded with grain. The crew works 12-hour shifts, 6 hours on, 6 hours off, for 28 days straight. They are approaching lock and dam number 12. The lockmaster already knows they are coming because the captain radioed ahead 30 minutes ago. Here is where it gets interesting. The lock is 600 feet long. The tow is about 1,000 feet long. So the crew has to split their tow in half, run the first half through, tie it up downstream, come back for the second half, then put everything back together. The whole process takes 3 to 4 hours. And there are 27 of these locks between St. Paul and St. Louis. But even with all those delays, even with the waiting and the splitting and the reassembling, it is still faster and cheaper than any other option. The alternative is putting that grain on trucks or trains that are already stretched to breaking point. The Mississippi River system isn't really a river system anymore. It's a machine. The Army Corps of Engineers spent decades turning a wild, meandering river into a controlled canal. They built levees to contain it. They dredged channels to deepen it. They installed locks to manage the elevation changes. What used to flood unpredictably now stays mostly where humans want it. Lock and dam. Number 25, just north of St. Louis, is getting a $732 million upgrade right now. They are building a new 1,200-foot lock chamber so those 15 barge tows can pass through in one shot instead of 2. It will cut the transit time from 3 hours to 30 minutes. The project will not finish until sometime in the 2030s. That's the thing about river infrastructure. It's expensive, it's slow, and it breaks down constantly because most of it was built 70 or 80 years ago. Take the B&P Tunnel in Baltimore. It was built in 1873. Every train running between Washington and Boston has to slow down to 30 miles per hour to navigate its curves. The tunnel leaks, the grade is too steep, and it is a single point of failure for the entire Northeast Corridor. If something goes wrong in that tunnel, Amtrak shuts down, freight stops moving, and the economic damage starts at $300 million per day. The Corps of Engineers is replacing it with the Frederick Douglass Tunnel. That project costs $6 billion and will not open until the 2030s either. But they are doing it because the alternative is watching the tunnel collapse and taking the entire East Coast rail network with it. This same story is playing out across the river system. The locks are failing more often. Delays are getting longer. Maintenance backlogs are growing. The Corps has $6.8 billion worth of approved projects they cannot fund, and another $2.7 billion in required annual maintenance they are not doing. Here's why that matters. The Mississippi moves 60% of America's grain exports. If the river shuts down, that grain either does not move or it moves by truck and train, and those systems are already at capacity. A study looked at what would happen if the Mississippi closed near St. Louis. Truck traffic on interstate highways would more than double. Traffic delays would increase 500%. Highway maintenance costs would jump 80% to 93%. Injuries and fatalities would rise 36% to 45%. And that is assuming the government spent $721 million over 20 years to upgrade the roads enough to handle the extra traffic. The same study found that if all the grain moving on the Mississippi switched to trains, the average train speed would drop by nearly 10 miles per hour because of congestion. CSX Railroad alone would need to buy 156 new locomotives and 5,616 new coal cars, costing $581 million just to handle the coal currently moving on the Ohio River. The rivers are not just moving cargo. They are keeping the other systems from collapsing. And yet, using the rivers is free. There is no toll. Commercial barges pay a fuel tax of 29 cents per gallon that goes into a trust fund for construction projects, but that only covered $131 million of the Corps' $1.3 billion annual budget in 2020. The rest comes from taxpayers. Some people think that is unfair. They say the public is subsidizing agribusiness and chemical companies, and they are not wrong. American taxpayers are paying to maintain a system that mostly benefits industries shipping grain to China or moving petroleum products to refineries. But here is the counter-argument. That cheap, efficient transportation is what keeps food prices low. It is what keeps American farms competitive globally, and it is what prevents the highway and rail systems from grinding to a halt under the weight of cargo they were not designed to carry. The rivers also do things that have nothing to do with transportation. The locks and dams generate hydropower, and they control floods. They supply drinking water to 20 million people living along the Mississippi. They enable irrigation for hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland. Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley, two artificial lakes created by damming rivers for navigation, now have over $125 million in residential property along their shores. The Port of Memphis supports 2.5% of the county's jobs and generates $6.25 billion in economic activity every year. The Southern Indiana Maritime District along the Ohio River supports 60,000 jobs and produces $9 million in income per mile of shoreline. None of that exists without the navigation system. But the system is falling apart. Half the locks are past their 50-year design life. Unscheduled delays are increasing, and the competition is pulling ahead. China and Brazil are investing billions in their inland waterway systems, while America argues about whether to fund basic maintenance. There is a weird disconnect where everyone agrees the rivers are critical, but nobody wants to pay to fix them. Barge operators literally lobbied to increase their own fuel tax in 2014 because they were desperate for upgrades. It still was not enough. The irony is that the rivers are underutilized. Fewer barges move on the Mississippi today than 30 years ago because freight has shifted to trucks and trains. But those modes are overcrowded, and they are breaking down too. The solution is sitting there, waiting to be used, but it requires investment no one wants to make. So here is where we are. America has the best natural river system on the planet. It has been engineered into the most efficient freight network in history. It moves 624 million tons of cargo every year. It saves the economy billions of dollars. It prevents highways from becoming parking lots, and it keeps rail lines from seizing up completely. And it is crumbling. The question is not whether the rivers are important. The question is whether Americans care enough to stop letting them rot. If we do not, that farmer in Iowa loses his competitive edge. Your gas becomes more expensive. The trucks clogging Interstate 70 multiply. And that 1811 bet on the New Orleans steamboat, the one that built the richest economy in human history, starts to look like a really bad investment. The rivers made America. Now America has to decide if it is going to keep them.